Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Public Security meeting of April 13, 2023. Clerk, please call the roll.
Chavez, Dillard,
Here.
Donovan, Rodriguez,
Present.
Montgomery Step.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask if we have any public comments at this time.
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, I would entertain an approval of the minutes from November 17, 2022. You want to move them? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can I have a second?
Second.
All righty, we have a motion and a second. Is it necessary to go to public comment for this particular item? Okay, so we do have a motion on and a second on the floor. If there is no further discussion, all in favor of the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Let us move to our discussion items. We have a good agenda today. And so let's start with item 4, which is the Public Safety Focus Groups report. And Mr. Olson and Judith McCourt from the Red Hill Group will be reporting. Please
Well-
proceed. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair, and members of the committee for this opportunity. Again, Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications for MTS. And Judith McCourt from the Red Hill Group is with us today. And we're going to present to you the findings of the public safety focus groups that the Red Hill Group did to us back in February. And what this stems from is a customer satisfaction survey that we do every 2 years. And from those results, we get some very positive news about our agency. It reflects very highly. People are happy with our service overall, 91%. With our fare collection system, 92% satisfaction rate. Also some other good information, but it's also an opportunity for us to learn how we can do things better. And so we found a few opportunities there with the cleanliness of the system, lighting, some other things similar to that of how we can improve. But one of the things that the Red Hill Group asked respondents to this survey back in September, when it was done in 2022, was, if there's something that MTS can do better, what would be the number one thing? And the overwhelming response was more security. But what we talked about at the board meeting when this was presented back in September is that, more security can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what we wanted to do based on that discussion was have Red Hill Group do some focus groups, drill down into that information a little bit more and see what rises to the top. And so the Red Hill Group will present those results today. And we can look forward to a discussion after that and get some feedback. We have some ideas on how we can use this information to better our system, but certainly also want to hear back from this committee as well as other board members. So with that, I'll turn it over to Judith.
Members of the board, good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to hear about the focus groups that were conducted in February. I should note that when the satisfaction survey was done, which a lot of this was pulled from, the desire to do this, it was just coming out of the pandemic. So keep in mind that it was post-pandemic recovery. So some of the things that people said in the satisfaction survey may have at least been geared by the fact that they've been cooped up for practically 2 years, like we all were. So while satisfaction was high, there were 3 areas that surfaced out of the customer satisfaction survey that we explored in these focus groups. One of them was that perceived safety in the system had dropped to 81% from 86%. Satisfaction with the behavior of others passengers had dropped a lot to 67% from 78%. And there were some questions about fare equity in terms of checking. So the focus groups were initiated to try to understand more what people were thinking on a qualitative basis. So what we did in February is conducted these focus groups. So we conducted 2 of them. And we looked at a variety of different topics, ranging from trip patterns to safety perceptions to fare checking. So what I would like to do now is to jump into what we actually found. First of all, I think it's important to take a look at a profile of who the people were who did participate in the focus groups. It was demographically very balanced. We had one group that was for persons who had stated gender preference of a woman, and other focus group that was gender preference of a man. So we also had a very wide distribution of age, ethnicity, and representation of people who were students and who were not. In terms of travel characteristics, it was a great representation there. We had people who used public transit frequently, and then those who used it less frequently. So there was a balance in what people were saying to us. And in terms of trip purpose, from work to leisure and recreation, these represented a variety of patrons who use MTS services to travel for a variety of different modes. They traveled on the bus, they traveled on the trolley, and they traveled frequently and not so frequently. So moving forward, I should say also that they represented a very good balance of people throughout the actual service area. They were people from the Central Core, there were people from South County, there were people from the East, there were people from the northern areas. So it was really distributed, and I think that's important as we look at the findings. During the focus group, I should say that there were also interactive polls that were conducted. You'll see those that are on this page shown in the yellow and the green. Those polls were conducted so that we got the sentiment of the group prior to them discussing a particular question. So they were not biased by other people's, by parts of the discussion. So first topic that we explored was feeling personally safe. Is how important was that to people? And you can see here that feeling safe is very important to both men and women. I will talk here throughout the presentation a little bit about some of the differences between men and women, and that's why we're breaking them out, because there are differences in certain places, and certain places there are not. We asked people to consider how they felt being personally safe over the whole continuum of the trip. So if you think of a trip, you think of your origin and your destination, you have your access and egress points, you have your waiting for transit, and you also have your riding for transit. So what we did find was that experience or observing incidents is a common phenomenon. Participants could recall at least one time when they were concerned about their personal safety because of an incident that was occurring. Men were more likely to relate incidents that they had observed, while women were more likely to relate an incident where they felt that they had experienced a range of situations ranging from maybe verbal sexual harassment to being followed at some point during the trip train. So what does that mean? Does that mean that people are continuing to ride transit, or are they deferring trips because of their concerns for safety? Most men do not avoid trips because of the concerns of personal safety. Again, you'll see here that we've integrated a few quotes, give you an idea of what the feeling was. In this instance, we chose one: I never decide not to take public transit. I always feel safe enough to use MTS. When you look at it from from a woman's perspective, they were much more likely to say they considered time of day, they perceived danger associated with locations, the presence of persons with mental health issues, and traveling with children was a concern to them. So a typical comment was, I have to deal with a lot of homeless and mental health issues on my street and at my stations. I have a baby and I won't bring him on public transit because it's too dangerous. So what you can see here is men were not going to defer a trip, while women were more likely to consider deferring making a trip on transit because of the concerns about safety. So let's look at some of the other issues, including temporal use. And everybody used transit during the daytime. Weekend use, it was more often that women used transit than men. This might suggest that perhaps women were more transit dependent than men. We did not have information as to whether or not they had a car available to make the trip. Daylight hours, everybody used transit in daylight hours, and the percentage of persons who use transit during non-daylight hours goes to about half, and it's not very different for men or women. Here's what men said about traveling after dark. They do have safety concerns. They generally don't feel as safe as traveling in the day. But these concerns do not deter them for making a trip. And why? When you asked men about this, they said they feel that they can address this situation personally. They can get out of it. They used words like, I can fight, I can do things, I can run away. They felt confident in their abilities to escape from a situation that might occur. And men also said they did perceive a presence of enhanced security compared to a few years ago. This does change a little bit when men have children. When men are thinking about bringing their children on transit, they are more concerned. And this quote kind of summed it up here. I think there are a lot of things, things are a lot more secure. I can protect myself and I can run if I have to, but I have 2 toddlers and I think it's kind of risky for them. So if you take a look at this now from a woman's perspective, women feel less safe traveling from dark. However, they feel that they have to make transit trips at night because this is the only thing that's economically feasible for them. Sometimes when they opt not to take transit, they'll use a taxi or Uber or Lyft if they feel that the danger of using transit outweighs the economic burden of taking a trip from another source. Women say they would like to use transit more after dark so that they can take part in more community events. And I won't read both quotes, but I think I'll read the second one. I get held up at the hospital and work late and then have to do the dreaded ride in the dark. And I'm going to leave it at that. That is kind of portrayed what women felt about traveling after dark. So now let's take a look at the perceived safety waiting for transit. You can see here that, again, this was a little mini poll that was done. Men feel generally safer waiting for transit than women do. Women say they feel less safe, that stop locations are important for both groups. Women try to avoid the locations they don't think are safe. And again, they mention access and egress in the evaluation. Here, there's an example. This was a younger woman, and she said that at the corner where the bus stops a few times there's a guy, and he's obviously there fairly frequently, or frequently enough for her to remember that he tries to swing at me. I've been thinking about walking up a little or maybe to a trolley station. Coming home, I usually get off at the stop before his and then take the longer way around. So then we ask people, what does make you feel safe when you're waiting? And here, good lighting came up. It was important. The presence of security cameras, unobstructed visibility, the presence of other people, locations that are free of persons who are loitering. If seating is available, semi-protected with an unobstructed view. So people felt that where you travel matters, and they expressed that they feel less safe in some areas than others. The triangle that you see on this was really the triangle that came out as sort of the area of heightened concern for people, which was downtown San Diego, extending from Old Town to H Street were mentioned of higher concern, and the Euclid trolley station. Up around the university area, after the time that students are there, have left, people feel a little more concerned. Women perceive riding the trolley is less safe than men. And you can see here that they feel equally the same about riding the bus, but when it gets to the trolley, there is a difference. So you can see what was happening there. Trip time is a factor, however, and people will sometimes opt for the trolley because it takes less time. And by taking less time, it means they feel that they have less exposure during the situation. Presence of a coach operator is huge in making people feel safer. Creating a safe trolley environment does involve multiple elements: presence of visible security, the presence of other riders, avoiding locations with disruptive riders, and remaining constantly alert. People use other strategies as well to enhance their personal safety. Staying alert is paramount, and a phrase that came up several times is Having your head on a swivel is a requirement to feeling personally safe, and avoiding attracting attention. Women do give consideration to what they wear when riding transit, minimizing jewelry, backpacks, and avoiding anything that they would consider that might attract attention. We asked people if they knew what they thought about identifying security. And people think identifying security is easy. And it's easy to identify security by their uniforms. People say that they understand the roles of MTS security, and that they know that they're the yellow shirts and the blue shirts is what they referred them to. And they feel that there's greater authority with the yellow shirt, even though they do not have weapons. So people also know that there are, from time to time, transit ambassadors there who assist. Security is perceived as courteous and respectful. This is a typical quote. It's always been a pleasant experience. I've never had issues with security. Watching them with other people, they're very lenient. Overall perceptions of security, people like seeing security. They associate security with ticket checking, and they know that when security is present, they feel safer. We did ask, is there ever a time when you think that there is too much security? And they said no, we're not at that point in the system where we think that there's too much security. How people respond to an incident is important. There is not a feeling within the groups that there's too much security. Perceptions of visible security, I think this is interesting. You can see there's a very different perception between men and women on if security is visible or not. 75% of men say that they see security at least half the time. Well, conversely, 75% of the women, about 3/4 of the women say, gosh, they rarely see it. So, and we asked, does visible security enhance the feeling of personal safety? Yes, people say that it does, and that was unanimous. Security is less visible in some areas. Again, we can talk about where that is. Since this is a small group, you have to think that they recognize that security is a finite resource. And because of that, there may be in other areas, perhaps in that reddish triangle where they're more concerned, but they do say it's less visible in some areas. People think security does go beyond personnel. There is an awareness of cameras at stations. Next, trolley and bus signs are seen as security enhancers. The awareness of the ride assured number is low. We also asked people about the frequency of tapping their Pronto card, and most people say they tap their Pronto card at least at some point during their trip, but not throughout the whole trip. And why? Tight transit connections or inconvenient validator locations, concern about locational tracking, not understanding why the tapping is required. If they have a card, why do they have to tap it? And enforcement will be a friendly warning, really without much consequence. Most riders say that they experience fare checks and they think that they're equitable. And there's no difference really between what men or women think about if they're likely to get a fare check. Encouraging more riders to tap. People suggested more convenient validator locations. That kind of goes with why they don't tap. More outlets to purchase Pronto cards. The consequences could be beyond a warning, and explaining the importance of tapping, and then dispelling fear about locations. Behavior of other passengers. This was also an area, this is a really interesting discussion to have with the group. And I know we're almost out of time here. And I think that way people feel is it's complicated. They're very aware that it's a shared responsibility. There's an elevated level of concern about inappropriate behavior of other passengers. Incidents occur in the daylight as well as at night, so it's not just a time of day issue. People are generally empathetic and compassionate, and think the problems are really societal and complicated. And when these situations occur, it creates fear and discomfort for them. The issues of major concern are cleanliness, personal hygiene of others, disruptive behavior, open drug use, and fare evasion. And what they think can be done about them that's in MTS's control is that they would like to see MTS, they know MTS has policies to address fare evasion, inappropriate behavior, and loitering, and they would like to see more what they would consider more consistent application of MTS policies. It should be noted that what people want may not necessarily be, there may be a reason security is doing what they're doing. So, and approaching the situation the way they're approaching it. So this is people's opinion of how they would handle the situation. I think that's an important note. And they see visible security as a driver to the solution. And Mark, I'm going to go to you for this next slide.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Just some items that we have for next steps that we've been thinking through a little bit here is certainly we want to get feedback from the Public Security Committee. Also, if the committee feels it's necessary and would like us to, we can present this information to the Board of Directors at an upcoming meeting. We are launching a Respect the Ride rider etiquette campaign that educates the riders a little bit more about some of these pain points that Judith had talked about. Some of the findings from the social equity listening tour that are going to be coming before the board either in May. We'll address some of these issues as well in terms of like lighting and just trying to address some of the safety issues and infrastructure things that we can improve. I think really with the Ride Assured hotline, we have that information, all over our system, on our vehicles, on our platforms, but we got to look at some new ways to communicate this information out because it's really important that people know that there is a number that they can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and either talk to somebody or text somebody and get a response right away. That is available to them, but we need to do a better job of communicating that out to people. I know IT, and one of the things that we're working on with there is that it's 2 different numbers right now, which can be confusing in itself. The idea would be to get it down to 1 number that's very simple that people can call and just plug into their phone and have it there. So working on some solutions on that front. And then also I know Director Styler is going to be talking about this in the next presentation, but it's really identifying ways that we can enhance the overall approach to security. And so I believe he's going to bring forward that information to you in the next item. So with that, we can open it up for discussion.
Before we go to discussion, I wanted to let you know, I sat in, as did some of the rest of the staff, on the focus groups. And the first one was with the female passengers. And I walked away from that so demoralized that this was what our riders feel when they're out on our system. And obviously, it's not just a transit issue these days. When people feel unsafe just walking on the sidewalks, that's an issue as well. Yeah, so that was, but also the Ride Assured, we've really been trying to tout it, and we clearly dropped the ball on that. If our customers don't know that that is an available thing for them, then we've really dropped the ball. And so we're already working towards that. And then, a lot of people talked about lighting. So that as one of the things that we're going to try to bring forward with the social equity listening tour is a enhanced lighting program. And then one of the other things, the cleanliness issue. All of the folks talked about how if it feels unclean, then it feels unsafe. And that was something that really struck us. They said the bus is pretty good, but the train is not. And so we've already enhanced our cleaning protocols. Brian has increased the number of personnel and time of day when they're going to have people cleaning trains. So we're already moving in those directions with some of these initiatives, but that's all I have.
Yeah, certainly some good information that can help us get better.
Yeah.
I think you're right about the women and how they would change their trip patterns around based on, their feeling safe and secure. And when are those times when they feel the most safe to ride?
They would wear running shoes so they could run if they needed to.
One thing I do want to say is MTS is not alone here. I've done these focus groups for other agencies, and I did a big study. I was part of a study which was understanding how women travel, which was really dealt with issues up in LA. And this is the way that women feel traveling on transit, not just at San Diego. And I applaud you for addressing it and for addressing it for all people and for all patrons. But I just don't want you to feel like you're out on an island. You're actually with the rest of the transit systems throughout the country.
Thank you so much. Before we go into discussion, I want to make sure and check and see if there are any public comments.
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, we actually brought, I believe it was Circulate San Diego, had a study about how women perceive the transit line, what they experience when they are riding. So it is, that may have been pre-COVID, but I think that the sentiment has gotten a little bit worse. People are a little bit more fearful at the time in history where we are now, which is something I think that we can gather wisdom from those who participated in the focus group, that it really is a collective response from you know, a collaborative community working together around these issues. It's very tough, very tough. So I would like to turn to the members of the public security. We will start with Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you so much. And I first and foremost want to thank the staff and everyone who participated in gathering this information. It is so vital for us to truly understand if we are not riders on a daily basis, we wouldn't fully comprehend what you just recapitulated for us. So thank you. And I have to admit, it really saddens and sickens me, but I was that person that, rode the trolley with that fear as well, right? When I was going to school. And you really think about in the morning, what are you going to dress and how are you going to dress? And you don't want to look at anyone. And if you see in the study you presented to us, 75% of men said, yes, I see personnel. And 75% of women say, no, I didn't see it. And who do you believe, right? The person that's more likely to be getting an aggression. So I really think that an unarmed staff member, I don't want to say officer, but unarmed, just the presence, really, that's what we saw, is enough to give that security, that's feeling of a companionment through the ride. And I think this is really an eye-opening information that we are receiving today. I can run, but I have 2 toddlers and they can't run. That really breaks my heart in so many levels, right? I would make recommendations, we saw them today, increasing visibility of staff, security personnel, otherwise just staff, and cameras. I do have a question about response times on cameras. I don't know who's the adequate person to ask Sharon about this. Improving lighting is key. Maybe even implementing a text alert system, a live text alert system, and providing additional employee training, but just the presence again, I don't know, panic buttons that immediately alert the security system, the staff, that they can immediately arrive at the next station even and tend to this emergency, right? I was previously in Council District 3 in the city of San Diego. And one of my colleagues from my office, she rode from Chula Vista to downtown every single day. And more than one time she would tell me, I had someone screaming at me nonstop throughout the whole trip, right? And I changed and he changed and followed me. And that's just heartbreaking. And when you talk about, I can run, but my toddlers can, it breaks my heart. It really does.
Yeah, just to your question regarding the cameras, we have cameras on board all our vehicles, but we don't have remote access to see into them. But incidents that happen at stations, as soon as they're called in, we have personnel that can look at those cameras immediately and have eyes on and get officers to respond to that location.
I'm sorry. So did I understand that you can't see inside
We cannot remotely access the cameras that are inside the vehicles.
Gotcha,
We don't have that technology yet.
right.
The cameras that are on platforms, on stations, we have immediate access to them. Then we can go to them, see what's going on in that situation and respond, deploy our personnel or request police response if that's required.
So I remember in a previous meeting, Sharon, that you mentioned that you did have panic buttons inside the trolley, right?
It's a button that goes directly to the operator, the one that's driving the train.
And what happens when it gets pressed?
Brian, do you want to talk about protocol on that? What do you train your operators to do?
I'm
You'll
sorry,
have-
I just have a lot of questions on this because,
So each one of the vehicles are equipped. Each one of the vehicles are equipped with emergency response buttons. So if there's any sort of situation that occurs on board the train, the passengers they can hit that button and they can communicate directly to the operator. The operator in turn will call the control center. The control center will manage it from that point, whether or not there needs to be law enforcement or security that needs to respond to the situation. And that could be anything. That could be someone with a personal injury. It could be, a fight, anything that's on board where they need to communicate to the operator and the operator has direct line of communication to the control center. No
Yeah,
problem.
the only challenge with that is if it's a really emergent situation where somebody feels unsafe and they don't want to call attention to themselves, they might not feel confident enough to go up and hit the intercom because they could become the target. So that's why we have the ride assured texting system, which is, we have that anytime during operation, we respond to that, correct?
That's
Val?
correct. I use it myself. I ride the system. I don't own a car here. I take the trolley and buses where I'm going and I use the rider assured whenever I have a situation and I get a response from our communication center almost immediately. And then the dispatch personnel.
appreciate that. And I would love to see that response time, right? And maybe see how we can promote it because it's also a lack of information that our writers might not know about this. But in general, I think that we can look at holistic solutions to maybe, and I think on our one-on-one, when we talked, Sharon, a few months ago, I mentioned, why not even promote a part of the trolley only for parents, women, children, right? Why not even promote a place in the trolley where they can get on with their stroller without having to close it, even though you don't implement it, but it is a rule. That they could just get on with their stroller and their kids and not having to close it. And, maybe feeling just a designated area. And I'm thinking outside the box here and maybe it's not even feasible, but I want to throw this out there because what we saw today and what you are mentioning, women are not feeling safe. I never felt safe riding the trolley. I know many cases, people, and specifically, unfortunately, and it disgusts me, but it's still the world we live in. It's still women who are mostly the target. So thank you so much for this information. I hope we can move forward some holistic solutions.
Thank you. And this is why we're here, right? For ideas and questions. Thank you for those questions. Any other, Councilmember Dillard?
Hi, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I have a question and then a comment in regards to just in hearing what Sharon was referring to, the button. Can the operator hear what is inside the trolley, or how are they notified that there's an issue? Just like someone brought up about someone screaming at them the entire trip. Yeah. How is that person helped if they don't feel comfortable going and actually getting up and going and pushing the button? Can the operator hear someone screaming at someone even though they may not be physically attacking them?
So if the incident's happening on the lead vehicle where the operator's at, generally the trains operate in 3-car consists, meaning that there's 3 vehicles that are connected. Based on what direction we're traveling in, the operator is going to be in that lead car operating the vehicle. So more than likely, if it's happening on the first car that the operator's in, they'll be able to hear it from inside of the cab. However, if they're in the second or third car, they're going to be more than likely reliant on that emergency push button for them to be able to hear the intercom system. And that's an intercom system. So Once that's pushed and they acknowledge it, they'll be able to hear everything that's actually happening on board the vehicle, regardless of what car that they actually push it from. They'll be able to hear the incident that's actually occurring. And as Alan mentioned earlier, we do have video, which is audible and visual on each one of the vehicles. Each vehicle has cameras that are on the exterior as well as interior. So when we go back after an event actually occurs, we'll be able to hear what actually occurs as well as see what occurs. But in real time, generally, once that emergency button is depressed and they respond to it, they'll be able to hear what's going on and they'll be able to get the appropriate response as far as emergency response to the appropriate person, whether it's, you know, like I say, law enforcement or whether it's security or whatever their request is. And it works actually fairly well. We have a standard operating procedure for it. Control center is very, very responsive to the, you know, when those types of calls come in and, you know, they get security involved. Security is right in the same office as our control center that's managing the train movement out there. So works pretty well.
Thank you. Another question that I have is based on the experiencing and observing incidents and that it's in common. And I was wondering with that survey, if that was people who were responding to what's inside the trolley, or was it outside the trolley, or both?
It's a great question. This is the focus groups where we were having these roundtable discussions, and it occurs throughout the trip chain. So that means that they are observing an incident. It could be inside a trolley, it could be at a station, it could be anywhere along that trip chain, which makes it really a larger problem in some senses. You mean MTS can control a portion that belongs to them, but there's always going to be that other portion. But
Yeah, I would really like to know, like, is most of the incidents inside, or is it evenly split, or is a lot of it occurring on the platform? Just so we can really understand what we may be able to zero in on that may be more of a dangerous possibility.
there was a larger concern when people were in confined spaces. So the concern heightens for people, when the escape route is not as easy. So if you're on if you observe something on a station or a stop, you have an opportunity, be it real or not, to get out of it somehow, or to have somebody else see or whatever. But if you're in a confined space, you have to wait until the next stop. And people spoke, and I call this car hopping, was not uncommon, that if they did get into a car and were going along and an incident occurred, their choice was to get out of the car and get onto the next one. That works really well unless the perpetrator sees that's happening and gets off and follows. So that is the strategy. Also, people will go to that first car if they think about it, because they know that the operator's there.
And are there panic buttons on the platform or only inside the cars?
I believe it's only inside.
It's just inside the cars. But to your question about specifically where things are occurring, we just created a position this year for a crime and data analyst. And we're really getting a lot better at drilling down into specifically where incidents are occurring. So what we're dealing with here is perspective information right now, what people feel. With this new position that we created, we'll be able to really drill down and to see exactly where incidents are happening.
And as far as security presence, I know that I've seen, I travel on the trolley every time I come to a meeting. So if I'm late, it's the trolley's fault. I'll just say that. But to be honest, I'm usually never late, but it does happen, but only by a couple of minutes. But what I wanted to ask is, do we have a need, or do we even have the capacity to have security present on the platform as a regular occurrence?
So I have a presentation that I'll follow up with this just about the format of our department. But right now we have just about 66 code compliance inspectors and about 200 contract security guards. But we have 66 stations, 62 stations, 67 miles of track. We're doing about 4,000 trips a day and about 3 million passengers a month that we're carrying. We are small amount of people trying to cover a large amount of area. So that was specifically one of the reasons why we brought in this position for a data analyst, so we can make data-driven decisions about where to deploy our personnel. You know, we don't want to be anecdotal and think, well, this seems busy or that seems busy. We really want to be able to drill down, and this is the first time we've been able to do it, really be specific into not just locations, but also times. You know, let's use we have a limited amount of personnel, let's use them efficiently. Maybe we don't need somebody for 10 hours at Iris. Maybe he just needs to be there for 3 hours and then we can move to another busy spot. But with the information we're collecting, we'll be able to be better at that.
Yeah, also too, I noticed that the times for traffic lessen on the weekend. So maybe that would be a consideration as well. If you're thinking of placing more security, it would be during the week time, and maybe even in the evening, that might be something that we could take a look at, because, you know, obviously dark consists with that. But I was also wondering about the cameras. Would it make sense to have, you know, how inside the cars there are, I hear, you know, like a recording on a couple of different items. Does it make sense to have speakers on the platform that basically remind people that they're on camera, perhaps? Because I know that sometimes even a person speaking, even though that may sound like a recorded message, reminding people that, you know, there is security present and that they are on camera would also help, especially women, feel safer. I know that for me, I would feel safer if I heard and knew that others around me also knew that they were on camera. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, and I'm sure it's something that we can get into our system.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, let me just, the Councilmember Rodriguez, and then we'll go to Councilmember
I
Donovan.
won't take long, I promise. Thank you so much for staff for helping prepare this, taking the time and energy to do it, and for conducting the focus groups. It's incredibly important. So I do have a few questions. Do we believe that the focus group results are indeed the broader ridership perception or something of the like?
Focus groups are qualitative. It's always qualitative data because there's a small number. However, they are very much in line and just really provided just a lot more depth to what we saw in the customer satisfaction survey. So given that both pieces fit together rather nicely, I would say yes, that it does. It reflects what people are thinking. And as I mentioned before, the findings are consistent with what I have seen with other transit agencies as well.
And is there a specific location, a stop that seems to be safest within our transit routes, or those that are perceived to be maybe unsafe?
The unsafe ones were in the triangle, which
But is there one in particular, or a handful, or is it just kind of?
okay, well, let me.
I can tell you from what we have in a little bit of data that we have right now, you know, we do have some specific, you know, stations on our blue line, a little bit lower, like Iris and Palomar. We tend to get, you know, some vehicle break-ins. On our orange line. There's some areas where we tend to have a little bit more violence. Green line around Fashion Valley. That gets to be an area that causes us some significant problems sometimes. But as of right now, we don't really have a definite, you know, daytime pattern that we can go to.
In the focus group, people mentioned Old Town was of a concern to them. City College. Now, City College isn't entirely under MTS's control. I think there are multiple parties involved in that stop. 12th and Imperial. Iris is mentioned, and sometimes the Euclid station. Those are specifically mentioned as unsafe.
And what about the safest ones? Are there broader ideas of which ones those are?
That question, I did not ask that question, so I can't provide that.
I was just curious to see what the writer's perception is in a safe one and an unsafe one. And what are some of the things that we as an agency can do to mimic some of those that feel safe, right? Whether it's having adequate lighting that was mentioned, cleanliness, security cameras. I wonder if there are things that we can do that can have a significant impact.
There were statements about lighting, cleanliness that makes it feel safe. So stations that feel safe have that. Also, it's not the absence of people, it's the absence of people who are loitering. That makes it feel safe. So they want other people at the stations, but they want people there with purpose, people who appear to be traveling. One person mentioned, there's somebody who had set up with a lawn chair at one of the stations and whose prime purpose seemed to be, heckling people. So, he comes and goes, but when he's there, it's uncomfortable.
And that speaks to when you mentioned City College and Park and Markets, another station like that. Our platforms are city sidewalks. So somebody that's, right behind our platform on a chair playing loud music or drinking alcohol, involved in some drug activity, that's perception for that rider is that that's happening at our station. Although it might be a city problem, it is inches away from our platform, and that leads to that perception of areas being unsafe.
Do we have maybe some standards or metrics as to the amount of lighting that we aspire to have in each one of our stations, or the amount of cameras, or how often the cars are cleaned so we can have a perception of being in a cleaner environment?
So we have a designing for transit manual for both rail and bus stops and transit centers. And so we do follow that. But obviously every location is going to have a different dynamic. Old Town is a huge station with a big parking lot and a lot of buses activity, plus the trains. So that has a different lighting requirement than, say, 25th and Commercial, which is more in the neighborhood, and it's only got the 2 platforms and no bus.
I hear you. No, I again appreciate it. I do echo the sentiments of Councilmember Dillard in the need to have kind of ridership expectations to make sure that we all, and especially women and families, feel safe riding our transit system. It's paramount in order for us to continue to support expansion, that we address these issues. I mean, I could tell you as husband and father of 4 kids, very difficult being anywhere public with 4 little kids. And just with one, it's hard enough. But I think that is aspirational and something we need to continue to strive for in order for us to continue to expand the transit system. So thank you again for your work. I very much look forward to continuing to address these issues.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a whole lot to add to what's already been said. I just want to make a couple of comments. I sat in on the focus group with the young ladies, and as has already been mentioned, it was very demoralizing. I mean, I just kept thinking to myself, these ladies are just trying to live their lives, get to work, get to school, and they got to put up with all this. And as it's already been said, this isn't just a problem with MTS. It's a problem kind of socially, I guess. But I would just encourage us, all these good ideas, to pursue those, do as much as we can to try to alleviate some of this, mitigate some of the issues with the lighting, cleanliness, the panic buttons. I think I heard you say there's a number that people can text or a kind of an emergency call, things like that. I definitely think it would be good. I would recommend that we have the entire board here, maybe a condensed version of the report. There's a lot of real gems in here that just kind of get the point across. So those are my comments. It's just, like I said, just to think that these people are just trying to get from point A to B, and they got to put up with all this garbage. It's a shame. But thank you for the report, and I hope we can make some improvements and add some things to help mitigate some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's go back to Councilmember Chavez.
Two things really quickly. First, I heard that after an incident, the footage is really good, right? You go to it, you understand. But after it's a little late for me, right? Let's see if, I know budget is tight and I know this is just throwing it out there, but how much would it cost us to
I-
have live stream?
I'm not a technology person, but I know that the bandwidth necessary to push that kind of data out at that kind of quality with the sound and everything is probably enormous. So I don't know if it's a matter of cost or just if the technology is even available right now to do something like that.
And I love what was said about you're being recorded, right? That makes a whole lot of a difference. But you know, live footage on the moment,
Mhm.
being able to help on the moment.
Mhm.
For me, after an incident, it's way too late, right? And the other thing is, and I saw a lot of our MTS staff walk in, what are the frontliners saying, right? What are the people that are front and center, day to day, looking, what are they missing? What can be offered to, I mean, I would love to ask them, what are we missing? What would make your work better? It was in more staff? Is it cameras? What are we missing? And they're the ones who are literally front and center and taking care of this issue.
Yeah, so as a parallel to this, we also had meetings where myself and facilitated with the marketing group with various departments within the agency to find out just that very thing. And we called it the MTS experience, but it's basically to have the employees tell us what we're missing. What could make the experience better for our patrons as well as for the employees who have to work on the front line. And, you know, there were serious concerns from all with regard to keeping it safe. And then themselves feeling safe on this. And I know that Al's going to report to you on incidents of assaults on employees as well in a later thing. But yeah, we are asking those questions. You know, one thing that I asked our CCIs and the other security personnel, you know, why aren't we getting ridership back on the orange line like we are on the blue and the green line? And they said to a very large degree, it's because of perceptions of safety.
Yeah, and we actually have a presentation about our homeless outreach efforts, and I brought personnel here to speak to the challenges that we've been facing and dealing with those problems. Sure.
Yes, thank you. And I really want to thank the committee members for your engagement in this discussion as well. I've also wanted to call out our code of compliance inspectors that are here. In addition to all of MTS staff, thank you for what you do. I did notice I believe these are just two completely different types of, one was a survey and this was a focus group, but when we went over the survey, I think late last year, the beginning of this year, there was a difference between how people perceive the fair check by ethnicity. And that in the survey that African-American and Latino folks did perceive that their fare was checked more than their counterparts. And so I think just to the taking what we can and what we know to be true, right? And kind of matching up like, you know, the differences in what the focus group folks have said, what the people who have taken the survey have said, I think is important as we make our decisions as well. We, you know, it is such a hard time to engage in our discussions around public safety and public security because, you know, 99% of us know that our job is to keep people safe. That's what we're here to do. We have to do that. And then there are also just some underlying issues that always come with the history of this country and public security and public safety. So just keeping those in mind as well, as we have these discussions, I think is important. And I think MTS has done that. I think we've done that and engaged in all those conversations, made a lot of changes. It seems like the focus group people are okay with most of the changes. I did hear about the fare evasion issues, but the fact that they feel safe, with our CCIs, there along with security, the people who are unarmed, they feel safe as well. So I think that's good input for us, but we have to acknowledge the way that people are feeling. I, again, pre-COVID, women were feeling this way, right? This is just something as a society, those men who weren't scared, maybe sometimes there can be peer pressure for folks who are acting crazy on the lines as well. We've seen that folks actually stand up to those who are, not conducting themselves appropriately on the line. But it is going to be a collective effort because our security budget has not decreased. It has increased, so that is something that we haven't, as Judith said, this is something that is across many, many different lines, and we have done our best because that budget has increased. We haven't decreased anything. And we would think that talking about it, that we've done some kind of reduction, but we have not. And so we just have a lot more work to do. Really appreciate the work. Thank you. And again, we have to acknowledge this. The last question I do have is, as the budget is coming up, I'm just wondering if some of the survey and focus group responses as it pertains to lighting and capital improvement projects will be kind of serving as input into our discussions around our decisions we make around the budget.
Yes, especially on things like the lighting, where we could physically, it's a capital project cost. The cleaning, that was something that we just amended the existing cleaning contract to add station locations plus the after hours or later hours. So yes,
Okay, good.
long-winded way of answering.
Yeah, no, but it's important. It's why we do these things so that we can be informed. I just had a question about those who identify as non-binary, whether we have thought about an opportunity to interview folks that identify as non-binary as well.
We did have someone who was non-binary who had signed up for the focus groups. And the day of, they canceled. Typically, we recruit 2 people for every one we expect. So, and that isn't, it's a question that they answer during the survey process, the screening, as to what their perception is.
Okay, well, we'll keep trying. I appreciated being a part and hearing some of the experiences of the writers as well, being just an observer of the focus groups, and just really appreciate MTS staff's focus on making sure that we're in tune with our writers. I'm a choice writer. I do ride, but it is different when this is one of your only means of transportation. So we appreciate this report. Just lastly, with the possible action, I agree that the full board should hear this. The date, I will leave that up to staff if that's okay with the committee, just because I don't know what our agendas look like, and we've got a lot of decisions to make soon. So is that okay for moving forward for direction? Okay, sounds good. So thank you again. We will now go to our director's department overview. Mr. Seiler, thank you. You've already kind of got a warm up, so we're looking forward to you in the next few presentations.
It was never my own warm-up back before, so that's kind of weird. But I want to, Chair and everyone, thank you for your time this afternoon, allowing us to give this presentation. I just thought with new committee members, it would be a good idea to give an overview of our department, who we are, what we do. I apologize, Ms. Dillard, you've heard this before at the La Mesa City Council meeting, but I just thought it'd be important for everybody to know about it. So we're the Transit Security and Passenger Safety Department organization. I'm the director, Al Styler. I have my deputy director, Tim Curran, our operations manager, Scott Ibarando. Both of them have probably combined about 50 years of experience from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. We have our assistant operations manager, Isaiah Alexander. Isaiah is homegrown, started as a security officer here and worked his way through CCI, became a CCI supervisor, and now he is our assistant operations manager. Two new positions we created. First of all, was manager of professional standards. It's head by Sean Donaldson. Sean Donaldson is retired from San Diego PD, has extensive training in internal affairs, and also was an instructor at the police academy for several years. And our crime and data analyst, Jeremiah Johnson. As I said, that position was so critical for us to be able to finally start diving into data and information and see what we actually have going on, not just what, but when, where, and more importantly, why things are happening on our system. And we have our code compliance sergeants, our code compliance inspectors, and finally our transit security officers, our contracted partners, which are through Intercon. Our mission, vision, and values. Very proud of these. When I first got here, they're not mine. I didn't write these. I didn't create these. When I got here, we put a committee together of our team members and said, hey, who are we? What are we supposed to be doing? What does our day-to-day look like? And they developed these for us. And these are our bright light, our guiding for everything we do on our daily basis. And that's why, especially with our mission statement, provide a safe and pleasant public transportation experience for people. I sat and listened to those focus groups, and I can tell you, it hurt me just as much as it hurt you. I take it very personal when something happens to anybody on our system, and we strive every day to make it as perfect as possible. So our code compliance inspectors are MTS employees. They have more authority than our security partners, but they're not peace officers. They're not police officers. They're very limited in their scope of what they can enforce. They're considered public officers for the state, and their authority comes from the penal code through the board of directors by the list of ordinances that have been defined by the board of directors. That's what we're able to enforce. They are positioned at stations. They do rides on board our trains and buses, and they respond to calls for service in cars. They do have the authority to issue citations for violations of those ordinances, and they are unarmed. Our transit security officers are partners, again, through Intercon, and their contract employees. They mostly serve to provide security at fixed posts at our stations, but we do have them right along with our CCIs at times. They also have mobile units and respond to calls for service. We have an armed and unarmed component to this team. They have very limited authority, and pretty much their authority is about the same as a private person as far as, being able to make an arrest. And it's only for the immediate safety of somebody in danger. They're more of like eyes and ears. They do not have the ability or authority to write any citations or enforce any of our rules and regulations. Just a brief idea of some of the training that we're doing with our team that we've instituted in the past couple of years. We have our de-escalation training, which all of our team members go through and get retraining on that throughout the year. Anti-bias policing. They've all attended our psychiatric emergency response training that is supplied by the county through PERT, extensive customer service training. And as of July of 2021, I can't believe it's almost 2 years, we've all of our CCIs are trained in the use of Narcan. We have our bus enforcement support team that call themselves the best team, and they're pretty darn good. But we have two teams. One supervisor supervises two teams of, it's one CCI and one transit security officer. We have coverage 7 days a week during the day. They can respond to calls for service. If a bus operator has an emergency, he can call through his control center and we'll dispatch somebody. but their primary responsibility is to get feedback from the operators that goes through their management, and we can have them respond to specific problem areas. For instance, maybe there's a certain bus stop that becomes a problem for them, or maybe there's a certain passenger that boards at a certain time that may be giving them problems that we can respond and address those situations. They also do a lot of work, and I'll talk about it more in another presentation, but they do a lot of work in outreach services to people that are along our system, mostly in our bus stops. Our bike team, we've had for about a year now, and they've been very successful, particularly during special events. We deployed them right before Comic-Con, and we found that downtown here, especially between 12th and Imperial, going down to the convention center station, gets very congested when there's big events, Comic-Con, conventions, baseball games. With this bike team, they're able to get back and forth very quickly to those 3 or 4 stations and have immediate response to any problems we have with these larger crowds. We have a canine team. We have 3 teams, units that patrol MTS trains, buses, and our stations. They are here to assist with big events. They are all explosive detection dogs. We partner quite frequently with our partners, local law enforcement, if there's big events going on in the area. And I was very proud when for the 2nd year in a row, we were asked to deploy through TSA to help protect events and venues at the Super Bowl for the past 2 years. So it was very good for us to be able to do that. I'm going to do this real quick because I have a whole presentation about our outreach services, but this has become a big part of what we do with our best team, our outreach services team, and we have our camps team here. We partner as much as we can with local outreach agencies, but our biggest partner has been the Downtown San Diego Partnership, and I have invited Alonzo Villas and Danny Garcia. They're here, and they'll be speaking during our next presentation. But with what they provided us as partners, it's been allowed us to do things that I don't think a lot of other agencies within the area are doing. In response to, some of the incidents that are happening on our system, we have a very limited resource of personnel, and we would try to be very wise in our deployments. So a couple of things we developed first of all, was our rider experience detail. And when we get, customer complaints in certain areas, we will take a group of uniformed CCIs and TSOs. We'll have them work a certain area just to be highly visible and to increase that presence in areas that are making people feel unsafe. But again, you can't measure the things that don't happen when you're there. So we still had a lot of issues, complaints about, problem behavior on our system. So we created our passenger safety team. It's currently in the pilot phase, but this is a group of 1 supervisor and 4 CCIs. 2 of them will work in plain clothes, and with them being in plain clothes, they're able to observe behavior that might not normally happen if a uniform presence is there. So those situations that are making people uncomfortable, the yelling, the smoking in public, the drinking on our trains, they're able to identify it. And now because they absolutely witnessed it themselves, they can write the citation and take enforcement action for that. It's just been in the pilot program for about a month or 2 now, and I think we've had some success with it. And I really believe that our passengers are happy to see that, because when there's a problem happening and somebody in plainclothes steps up and addresses that situation right away, it makes them feel a lot safer to see that happen. Operation Lifesaver, we have, I believe, 5 of our officers that are trained through are certified through the California Operation Lifesaver program. And what they do is we give presentations we started out just giving presentations to schools, usually elementary or middle school students, just about dangers in and around our railroad, but we've actually been asked to give presentations to some adult groups. We presented for courthouse personnel, asked us to come down, and we did a presentation for them. And just a quick look, and just the trolley system, the side of our jurisdiction. Like I said before, 62 stations, 67 miles of track, almost over 3,500 trips a week, and we're carrying nearly 3 million rides a month. So with about 260 personnel, 24/7, it's a lot of area to cover and be visible at all times. Our biggest challenges, first of all, we want to enhance our outreach efforts. There's a lot of behavior on our system that makes people feel uncomfortable, and there's a lot of people in need that need help. And we're doing what we can to support that. We're a transportation company, but we do want to be a part of the solution. We carry citizens of San Diego, there are people being infected by it. So we want to make sure we're good partners with this. Crime reduction, obviously I said our mission is to provide a pleasant riding experience, and crime reduction is obviously a big part of that. We want to make it safer for our riders, but we also want to make it safer for our personnel. As Sharon mentioned earlier, speaking about assaults on personnel, between January 1st of this year through March 31st of this year, we had 69 assaults against my security personnel, and 65 of them were due to enforcement activity. And that's just a matter of asking somebody, hey, you're misbehaving, can you step off? And then the fight is on. Or, hey, can you just go up and buy your fare? And the fight is on. 38 of those assaults were physical. 8 of them were throwing objects. We had 7 instances of spinning, and then it goes into intimidation and verbal threats. And finally, of course, fare collection and enhancing revenue is a big part of what our challenges are. A lot of discussion after the focus group and things we talked about is, starting to take a look at reimagining what our security department looks like. And there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of things that could be done. And one thing could be increase our code compliance staffing. Each code compliance inspector is going to be about $80,000 in salary and benefits, but people want to see more visible presence, and code compliance inspectors are the presence that can do enforcement also. It's a possibility just to increase the contract security complement. And yes, they're eyes and ears, but they don't have the enforcement authority that we need to really have an effect on the incidents that are happening on our system. We can modify the mix between armed and unarmed personnel. We can do studies on that. And finally, maybe we need to think about including a law enforcement component to our system. We do work well with local police agencies, and they're fantastic in most cases, but they have their own priorities and their own things that they have to handle. And sometimes when we need police, they can't get here quick enough, or their priorities are not our priorities. And if we had our own some kind of component of law enforcement that we directed, it might be able to help us deal with these issues a little bit more efficiently. And before I finish this section, just if anybody's interested in a ride along with one of my team members or a couple of my CCIs, you'd like to go out there and see what their job is like, what they have to deal with, please just let me know. We'll get you a little bit of training before we go out there with you, and we'll set up the rides for you. So, and with that, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much. Just want to turn and check and see if there's any public comment.
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. And we will start with committee members. Councilmember Chavez.
I'm so passionate this meeting. First and foremost, I want to thank you for that incredible gathering of information, but also, it's so important for us to tell and talk to not just the contracted security officers and the outreach workers and from the inspectors, the compliance inspectors, the outreach workers from that downtown partnership, which I took a tour. I took a tour with We All Count and saw how great and compassionate they are with our unsheltered neighbors here in downtown, doing outstanding work. But I just really want to emphasize how they are the PR department. They are customer service. They are putting their life on the line. And while they might not be police officers, armed police officers, or otherwise, they are the face of all of us. They are the face of MTS, because we have to recognize that not all riders can read, can use technology, can have access to maybe a button. I don't know. I honestly, I don't even know where they are. And they will look at that shirt, they will look at that logo, and they will come up to them to ask them the most random questions. And they are our face and they represent us. And that's why I was so curious to hear from them what we're missing and what we can do to better the service. Because they are basically the ones who are listening day in, day out and know what we're missing. So I want to thank them, and hopefully we get a chance to hear from them firsthand. I know you mentioned that, so I'll be waiting on that.
Yeah, please reach out if you ever have time to do a ride along. You can have all the experience with them. I think it would be fantastic. We had some of our community advisory group members take a ride with our team, and it was eye-opening for them. Yeah, great, thank you. And just to speak about how they are the front line and the face, as much as what happened in that focus group, what was said, it took it personal. But I was a lot of pride in the fact that each and every person in that group said that every experience they've had with our code compliance inspectors and our security team was a positive experience, and that they felt that they were treated equitably and fairly with them. And that was a real big sense of pride for me, because we've done a lot in a couple of years to make sure that we treat the people right. And I'm very proud of all the men and women that I have in this room. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other committee members? I just want to thank you. I know you're going to sit in the same seat in
Yeah.
the next presentation, but I just don't want to brush over the 69 assaults. That, that is not acceptable. And so never want to send the message out that that is okay. It is not. And so however we can help with that, I don't know how you currently handle offenders that are assaulting, and how, of course, how that is defined across the board. But I just wanted to call that out. I still just, it's hard to say, but I don't want us to be living in fear of each other, of other human beings. I think that's just very important in general. Like, we have to look at each other and say hi to each other. And I'm saying this in an MTS public security meeting, in a formal meeting, but I think some of that is lost. And then our officers and inspectors have to make up for us kind of being isolated in our silos. So I just want to put that message out there, but job well done, and thank you for that. And with that, we will move on to item numbers. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. Karen Landers has something to say.
I just wanted to follow up on your comment. Like, we are working on a new initiative. Sometimes it's a little frustrating where there's an incident that happens, but people need to get on with their day and they don't have time to wait hours for police, and so we recently have been working with the city attorney's office that prosecutes many of these to talk to them about what our options are. And we are going to be having regular meetings with an assigned prosecutor and looking at, even if our officers can take the reports and get the people's names. We've got great video, we've got great evidence, and that if we put a packet together, then the city attorney's office can take the next step to prosecute, instead of there necessarily being the middleman of having to have PD be willing to come investigate, write the reports, and submit it to them. And so we're hoping that that will allow us to at least, some significant public safety assaults on our officers, assaults on, other employees and other passengers, or, general lewd conduct, things like that, that it's frustrating that just seems like nothing happens. And so we're going to work with them to see if we can put together an evidentiary packet that would support prosecution.
Okay, and we'll just stay updated as a committee on those efforts. And of course, I'm very, interested in the physical throwing objects, that type of thing. I think disrespectful comments are bad, but that might not rise to the level of getting physical, but just very interested in how we handle that. Okay, let us go to item number 6, which is the partnership efforts to assist persons experiencing homelessness.
All right, hello again. I wanted to give you a really brief a glimpse into the outreach efforts that we have developed here at the Transit Security and Passenger Safety Department. like I said, I brought key members of those teams here. If you have any questions, they'd be, well, maybe not happy to speak, but they will, they will speak. And I'm going to embarrass one of them here with a letter that I have to read. But I think it's just important that you know what we're trying to do to be a part of the solution with the problem that's going on here in the city and the county. So our overview of our outreach personnel is we have one homeless outreach team works on our day shift from Monday through Thursday. It's our PCI Cynthia Rogers right there trying to hide. And she's usually with one of our co-compliance inspectors and a member of the Downtown San Diego Partnership. We have our two bus support teams, and we have Alan McKenzie, who's trying to hide over there. There's our camp team, and I'll explain each of them. So as I said, our homeless outreach team consists of Cynthia Rogers, our co-compliance inspector, a contract security officer, and usually an outreach worker, an unhoused care team member from the Downtown San Diego Partnership. When I first got here a couple of years ago, I was trying to get something started, and I reached out to Alonzo Diaz and Danny Garcia, and I'm going to ask Alonzo to come up in a minute to talk about this. But I reached out to them and said, hey, we're having some problems with, people that in need of help here at 12th and Imperial. Can you help us? So once a week for a couple hours a day, they would send a unhoused care team member down here to work with Cynthia just to try to get some outreach efforts going like that. Not only did they that, but they also assist us in clearing up areas that are off MTS property, but sometimes cause us some issues. An example of that would be on C Street between 10th and 9th and 10th. The tents on the sidewalk were getting so far out onto the sidewalk that they were forcing pedestrians to walk onto the right of way of our trolleys to get around. And, just a quick call to Danny and the team, and they have it moved for us so that our trains can move safely and pedestrians aren't in any kind of trouble. They've also permitted us access to their rapid response team so that if we have somebody that's having some kind of critical mental health incident, they can send somebody down there to help us to deal with that problem. If I can, Alonzo, if I can put you on the spot to just come up and speak for a minute about our partnership. And I know he wasn't ready for that, so I apologize. Yeah, he doesn't need any time to, but if you want to just talk about our partnership.
Sure, absolutely. So good afternoon, first of all. Alonzo Vivas, Executive Director for the Downtown San Diego Partnership Clean and Safe Program. First and foremost, just thank you to Al and your team. I think one of the challenges that I think we have with downtown is, from a pedestrian standpoint, folks really don't understand or really to the complexity of, is this a city issue? Is this an MTS issue? Is this a county issue? Those type of things. So I think it's important that we're collaborating with all these efforts. So just to be clear on kind of our efforts, most of this is funded through the Clean and Safe program. That's a special assessment district. And then the other portion of this is through the city of San Diego through homelessness and strategies. So we've been able to help a lot of individuals either travel with their support system, get them housed, and as well as offer, immediate kind of needs with any type of these issues. So we'll continue to work on this partnership, and yeah, it's available for any type of questions.
Right. Thanks. So as I had mentioned, we started out with having, one outreach worker a couple hours a day, once or twice a week when I got here. And then last year, Alonzo and Danny committed somebody here full-time 4 days a week. And you can see from the numbers up there, when we first started, that was what 2022 looked like. And just in the beginning of 2023, we've had 1,023 patron contracts, 2 family reunifications. We've had approved shelter for people, but no beds available for 16 people. We've had 17 people placed in shelter, and with the help of the County Health and Human Services Office, we've had 25 people get their benefits. One problem that we encountered too, in addition to beds not being available, we've encountered a number of people. In the last 18 months, we've had 6 people that have what are called DNRs, and that's a do not return. And for some reason, they get on a list where they maybe act up in a shelter maybe 10 years ago, and it seems like there's no appeal process to get removed from that list. So as soon as we call, they can't get back into that shelter. some problems also arise and we'll have a person that's non-ambulatory and they're in a wheelchair and the only bunk available or bed available is a top bunk and they can't take it. So that's some of the problems. And, so we have these numbers, we look at these numbers, but I'm going to read a letter that we received just last week. And I know Cynthia is going to kill me for reading this, but I just have to, because numbers are one thing, but when you talk about forward facing and what our department does, I am writing this letter to inform you that the heroic acts of Ms. Rogers, one of your code compliance officers, has greatly impacted our lives. In December of 2022, the week before Christmas, Ms. Rogers went above and beyond to administer Narcan to 2 homeless people on 3rd and G Street. The 33-year-old female is my daughter-in-law. She was taken to Scripps Mercy Hospital where I work. She completely recovered from her overdose and was discharged from the hospital, but unfortunately, she went back to the streets of downtown. I am the legal guardian of my precious 7-year-old granddaughter. She loves and misses her parents tremendously. I am eternally grateful for Mitch Rogers, who saved the life of my daughter-in-law. I did not have to plan a funeral, but instead have been given hope, and my granddaughter still has her mom. I know that a mother can never be replaced, and a child will always have a longing for her mom. My granddaughter did get to spend some time on Easter Sunday with her mom, and without the selfless acts of Miss Rogers, that would not have been possible. I will always be indebted and thankful for Ms. Rogers for saving the life of my daughter-in-law. Cynthia. So, obviously that's a remarkable story, and she's doing that kind of work every day and we don't get letters about it. But what makes that even more remarkable is that incident happened on 3rd and G Street. That is not at one of our train stations. That is not at a bus stop. That is our teams working outside of silos to help people. And I think that really should be the model for a lot of what happens in the county and the city. And a lot of the problems that we're having here is because and I'll go into it, and I'm sorry to get so passionate about this, but there's a lot of times when we ask for help and people tell us we can't help because our program does not allow us to go over there. And by breaking down those silos and working with great people like Danny and Alonzo and Cynthia, we're able to make a difference doing that. So that's just my little editorial. Some of the challenges that we're facing, we don't have 7 days a week coverage, with all the problems that we have, just dealing with, our riders and passengers on the system, we can only right now dedicate 1 CCI to that problem. We don't have night coverage. Downtown Partnership is fantastic, but they have limited resources too, and they can only have 1 person come down and assist us. And we don't have a mental health crisis component. Yeah, we're doing outreach, we're handing out, offering shelter, we're handing out, supplies to people. But if somebody's dealing with a mental health issue, we don't have the ability to deal with that, and we don't have any case management. So there's no way for us to follow up if we help somebody today. Did they get to their doctor's appointment? Was their prescription filled? Did they get that meeting that they needed to get to for housing? Those are things that we miss because we don't have those abilities. Obviously, our wish list is to have additional teams, with dedicated outreach workers that are responsible specifically for transit and don't have to get pulled away into other areas. We'd like to have our own dedicated bed space, somehow if that was possible. That when we have somebody that says yes, because we all know when you're dealing with somebody that it could take hundreds and hundreds of contacts with that person before they finally say, yes, I want to go. And that one time that say yes, and you say, I don't have a bed, you've just lost a lot of work. You probably put yourself back to where you were before you were started. We'd love to have an assigned mental health clinician. I've reached out to several organizations trying to get some stuff done. I've spoken to PERT, hey, can we have somebody? And it's the same thing as our funding, goes for police departments. Our funding goes to this. We're not a separate country. People don't get on our trolley and go to a different planet. This is the city, county of San Diego, and those are the citizens we're trying to help.
And I want to add to that, unlike a lot of transit systems that have like a closed, subway system or whatever, we're open. So really, we're just like a conduit for people. We don't have people living on our system. They're not going to be there every day in the exact same location on our system. So the challenge for us is that we're not going to necessarily build that relationship the way somebody who can travel everywhere and go find people and find them where they're living, can build that relationship. But we can be the conduit for those people who are in the working, working for the cities or working for the county or any of the number of agency and contractors who are working out there to try to do outreach. If they're willing, that would be great if they wanted to ride our system to where the people they're trying to reach are. So that's where we're slightly different than a
Yeah.
lot of our peers with the subways, where they actually have people living in the stations or.
Right, like I had back in New York, I had Grand Central Terminal
Yep.
and Penn State, where we had people living in it, and you could dedicate, to that specific area. We just don't have that here. The people are very, transient, they're moving around constantly, but we can be a help because we will see the people. If there's an outreach worker looking for Al, oh, we saw Al on this train yesterday, we'll help you find him and get him to that next appointment that they need to get to. It's that continuity, it's that follow-up, that moves things along. Again, I mentioned our bus enforcement support team. We have one supervisor, and there's each team is consisted of one code compliance inspector and one transit security officer. And we have 7-day-a-week coverage, but we don't have coverage at nights, Monday through Friday. In 2022, they had 573 patron contracts. We met 1,121 buses to speak with operators. We responded to 265 calls for service. We had 73 people accept some resources from us and 105 people declined those resources. Our challenges: no night coverage, just not enough personnel, and we don't have dedicated outreach workers to be a part of that. From our standpoint, we would love to have 2 additional teams that cover our night shifts 7 days a week. I think not just for our passengers, but I think our team members, our employees, our bus drivers would like to know that there's somebody out there at night that can respond to a call and an emergency, or even if they're having that problem at a certain bus stop at 10 o'clock at night, or that certain passenger, that, we'd be able to address that issue. We have our camp team, which is spearheaded by Alan McKenzie. Our camp team is responsible for clearing areas on MTS property that may affect transit operations. We can have some camps set up on right-of-way sometimes. There's 2 islands in a river that for some reason MTS owns it. But that gets some people experience a homeless skid out there, and Alan's responsible for coordinating coverage to get that cleaned up. When we do the cleanups, we have a lot of partners. We have the San Diego Police Hot Team, their neighborhood policing unit. When we work like Mesa and Chula Vista, they're homeless outreach teams, San Diego Fire Rescue, lifeguards, Caltrans, and the Urban Corps help us with those cleanups. 2022, in these camps, we had 97% of the people in those camps declined services, just didn't want any help from us. They just, when we cleaned up, they just left. We had 50 calls for service for cleanups, 189 encampment details, 119 dead details on the riverside. We issued only 18 citations, and that was for violations if the person, wouldn't leave. And astoundingly, we had 51,000 pounds of trash removed from campsites, and a majority of that was from rivers, the river campsites that get inundated. Again, we don't have coverage 7 days a week and no dedicated outreach workers. And we'd love to be able to, again, increase this to coverage, 7 days a week and have dedicated outreach work. Some of our additional efforts that we've done in this respect, we updated all of our resource letters to include all areas of the county. So every one of our team members carries, outreach and service availability that we can give to anybody that seems to be in some kind of need. We have bi-monthly management teams with our outreach folks and downtown partnerships just to discuss what our efforts are doing, if we've seen any effect. We try to focus on individuals and see if we can particularly help one person. My team is tired of hearing this, and I know Scott's gonna roll his eyes, but I always say you can't boil the ocean, right? But if we can help one person at a time, that's a good effort. So we want to try to do that. We're part of the National Work Group. It's a group of transportation agencies throughout the country that are obviously dealing with the same issue. They held a conference in Denver last year. We attended. We're a part of the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. We participated in the UCSD Transit and Homelessness in San Diego Symposium. They've had a couple of meetings, which brings us, some of the educators and some outreach personnel in a room together to try to talk about these problems. We meet regularly with local business districts. We met last month with the East Village Education Corridor about their concerns. And we've participated in San Diego State's had a homeless resource day up at their campus, and we participated in that. I know it's a long presentation, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
I'll just check in on public comment before we start the discussion.
We do have public comment.
Okay.
Zeke Sandoval, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Zeke Sandoval with PATH, one of California's largest and most impactful nonprofit homeless service providers. Really appreciate the chance to speak. In addition to our decade of service to San Diego communities that you're probably all very familiar with, we also operate across the state and run a comprehensive outreach program on Los Angeles' metro trains and buses. So our successes and lessons learned from that program can be helpful to MTS as you think through options for effective engagement. MTS's concerns for its passengers of every housing status are unsurprisingly shared by transit agencies across California, as previous presenters have mentioned. LA's Metro continues to grapple with the needs of passengers experiencing homelessness and with security issues that affect every rider. Through the hard work of our dedicated PATH outreach team, hundreds of residents taking shelter on transit in LA have accepted services and gone into interim or permanent housing. Since the LA program began as a pilot in 2017, we provided direct services over 20,000 times, connected more than 3,000 individuals to temporary shelter, and moved nearly 600 people into permanent housing. What began as a pilot of just 2 teams on day shifts on weekdays has expanded into 13 multidisciplinary teams across the entire metro system, covering both day and night shifts, 7 days a week. Our teams there consist of generalist outreach, mental health and substance abuse specialists, and medical support from local health centers. We expanded our contract again, actually just 2 months ago, deepening our services in the city core and leading other providers to cover more train lines in their service areas. So as you're seeing, these programs can work, whether it's in LA or San Diego. People want services and will accept them when offered by a trained specialist in a trauma-informed manner. Security personnel still have a vital role to play in case of emergencies, but we firmly believe MTS will see results that are better for all riders when outreach programs lead with care and supportive services. Thank you very much.
There are no more public comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we can start the discussion. Councilmember Dillard.
Yes, thank you again, Al, for your great presentation and all the hard work that you and your department do. And thank you for all of our security that we have out there working every day to help people. It's very admirable and a difficult work. I just have a question. I want to make sure that you're aware of what La Mesa does with our home program. I'm not sure if your security officers are utilizing that, but I want to make sure that they have the numbers because our people work. We have 2 people right now. We're working to try to increase that staff, but it's made a huge difference. It's the home outreach mobility engagement, long form, but the acronym is HOME. But I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of it and that you have told your people so that they can utilize it when they're in the La Mesa area. Also, too, I was wondering with the new proposition that was passed for veterans, homeless veterans, if you have also, if you have your people asking those questions to see if they are veterans, because that is a program that is coordinated not just with that initial base, but also with other nonprofit organizations that are contributing to that to address specific issues like mental health, drug addiction, et cetera. And I just want to make sure that we are asking that question so that we can go ahead and get those veterans off the street because they are being provided, shelter or permanent resident.
First of all, yes, we are aware of the program in La Mesa. Chief Sweeney has been great with us and providing us assistance when we need it. And I'm not sure if we've encountered many veterans. Yeah. But we will make sure that we get the information that they.
Yeah, I just think asking the
absolutely.
question,
Yep.
And I'm so glad that you're using our homeless program, which is achieving so much success. Not just for veterans, but for many homeless. So they're highly trained and able to communicate with people and try to convince them that they can help them and get them to trust them. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I do have a question. First of all, let me just say this. I know, Ms. Rogers, you don't want any attention. But I tend to say this over and over again. We have a crying caucus at the city council. But what the type of care and compassion that you have, I think is what is missing in the equation when we're trying to roll out these solutions for our unsheltered brothers and sisters. I think that we do have resources. We may not have enough, but the compassion first, and then a place for people to lay their heads. As Al, you mentioned, if you finally get someone to accept the idea, just the idea that they can sleep in a bed, and then you don't have one, that you go back to zero.
Crushing.
You go back to zero. And so having that happen 16 times, that's a lot of times because you've talked to folks over and over and over and over again to get them to accept the idea that they could have a sense of normalcy again in their lives. And so that is crushing to me as well. And I don't know, we have to brainstorm solutions because this is about a year, right, that we've been hearing this and we get our updates. But if that means having a hard conversation with the county, the city, and all the city of San Diego and all of the cities combined, then that's okay. But I do believe that we don't need to put you in a position to have to tell us that anymore without bringing some solutions to the table about funding, what we can do. We're experiencing that too in the city of San Diego where, yes, there's about 10% of people that you contact will accept services, but sometimes the number is low because we just don't deliver as agencies.
We lose trust when we don't have what we've been promising for months.
Right. And that's just, we have to acknowledge that. That's a part of the equation. So, we will get together and try to maybe use this committee to brainstorm about some of those things. I just want to get to solutions oriented, especially, with the camping that is increasing in all of our areas. But also like that is those are the last things that people have that they call their possessions and, or that are their possessions. And we, have to maintain health and sanitation in our areas. But I can understand why someone would say, no, I don't want you to help me because you just took all my stuff, So we have to think through how we're doing these things. And that starts with having shelter beds available, having interim housing, and having permanent housing for people, I think. So I can remember a time on this board where we, MTS said, hey, we're having enough time running the transit. And that was true, but we still took this on. So thank you, everyone, for all of the work that you're doing in this space. And if we have no other comments, we will move to item number 7, shared mobility devices.
Thank you. So right now, the city of San Diego contracts with 4 shared mobility device companies. We have Bird, Link, Lime, and Spin. And they report that they are well coordinated large-scale thefts of their devices throughout San Diego. They have, through their observations and analysis, they've determined that the devices are being transported through San Diego County down to San Ysidro Station, where they're taken across the border. GPS trackers are taken, removed, disabled, and the devices are stolen. And they went to the city of San Diego, and the city is requesting MTS Transit Security Department to prohibit rented shared mobility devices on our vehicles. So that's the foundation of this. If we were to and take that on, first of all, we need some training from the companies. We need them to provide us with updated images on all of their scooters, what's in operation, any updates that become available. They're going to have to provide us with training on how to identify serial numbers, where they can be located, and any other identifying mark to determine if it's one of theirs or maybe personally owned device. And we're going to need, on a regular basis, a database of any, stolen, missing devices, so that we can compare it to what we might encounter where we're working on the system. Also, before an enforcement could happen in this regard, we're going to need to create an ordinance banning all rented shared mobility devices on all vehicles, buses, and trolleys. We're going to need to have signage posted. I think I have an example in this presentation, but we're going to have to get signage posted, vehicles, stations on board, to make sure everybody's aware of the violation. And another, maybe more event announcements to people, hey, you cannot bring that device on board one of our vehicles. Potential enforcement procedures, and this is kind of new, so we're kind of working through the flow chart on this, but I think the first thing to do is the person would be with the person, observe the person with the rental, and confirm that the person, advise them of the ordinance, and ask them to the board, or the board leave the device, and then they can get back on board the vehicle. If they refuse to the board, then it becomes, now it's an enforcement situation where we could issue an ordinance violation for violation of the policy and refusing to get the device off of our system. That's a sample of the signature. Just some of the consequences that are possible that we've identified that could come out of this. Quite possibly, we're going to encounter non-compliant patrons, which could increase unnecessary use of force. I haven't seen many scooters around here lately at all. I rarely see any on our vehicles. Maybe once in a while, I see more bicycles than shared mobility devices on our system. But people do use them, for first mile, last mile kind of thing. So we could have somebody not compliant. And if it is the person that is trying to steal it, more than likely, definitely going to be non-compliant is going to be our biggest issue. There might be some privately owned devices that may not be distinguishable that could result in some complaints against MTS. We're going to have some discrimination problems. We could have customers complain to us, well, how come that bike is allowed on here, but my scooter is not allowed on here, and it doesn't take up as much space as that bike does, so why am I being penalized? The companies, we're going to have to make sure that they're up to date on their databases. If they give us one that's reported stolen, but it was recovered and put back into service, and they didn't alert us to that, that could cause a problem where we could be liable for stopping somebody that we didn't have the authority to stop. And then also, we have to dig in deeper. Who's going to be the victim? Is it going to be the scooter company? Are they going to come out and sign complaints and do what has to be done every time we encounter one of these scooters, or is law enforcement going to respond to take a report for this? We'd like to, if we're going to go full on this, to do some kind of joint enforcement details, maybe down at San Ysidro, have, San Diego PD with Border Patrol and maybe do some work down there. We can reach out to local police departments, and if we encounter one in that jurisdiction, will they come out and help us deal with this problem? Will the companies themselves be willing to come out when we're doing details to deal with this? And a couple of things, do they have any kind of agreements with any other municipalities that are going to deal with this problem? Are they going to come out and pick up the scooters that are left laying on our platforms when we make somebody get off and leave it there? And finally, if our special details are done, how will they be funded? Just some examples of the devices and contact numbers. And I know that was brief, but this is just kind of a brand new thing that was thrown at us. So we're just trying to kind of figure out, how we can deal with this problem.
Okay, thank you so much. Any public comment on this item?
There's one public comment. Derek Stylen.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and Security Council members. My name is Derek Salen, Government Partnerships for the U.S. West Coast at SPIN, a shared mobility device company in San Diego. As you know, shared mobility devices like scooters provide a sustainable first and last mile complement to bus and trolley travel and have the potential to transform San Diego into a less car-centric region. Unfortunately, our continued operations have come under threat due to a significant increase in threat, much of which is enabled by the use of MTS trolley lines that enable the disassembly and transportation of stolen devices to the international border. This activity results in tremendous losses and impacts our ability to continue operating in San Diego. Based on accounts from our operations team, MTS security is not able to dissuade individuals from transporting stolen devices in the absence of code language. As noted in our letter dated January 23rd of this year, we respectfully request an amendment to MTS Ordinance 13 that would prohibit the transportation of shared mobility devices or for rent motorized or electric scooters and bicycles by way of MTS trolley or bus apparatus. Shared mobility devices greatly bolster the use of public transit, provide a cheap and convenient method of travel to and from the last mile, and help foster a greener and more livable San Diego. We encourage your support and look forward to partnering with the MTS to curb theft and foster a more sustainable city. My colleague and I are here and available for any questions you might have during the discussion as well. Thank you.
Kylie Ludman.
Good afternoon, Chair Montgomery Stepp and honorable members of the committee. My name is Kylie Floodman and I am with Bird's Government Partnerships team. On behalf of Bird, I would like to express our appreciation for including this item in your agenda for consideration, which would ban shared mobility devices on transit vehicles and facilities. Bird has been operating in San Diego since 2018 and has been helping to promote micromobility as a whole in the region, leading to the creation of shared mobility device program in San Diego. Since its launch, we have been committed to working with regional transportation leaders such as MTS and Sandag to incorporate micromobility as a viable first and last mile option that complements the public transit network in San Diego. As a result, micromobility has been widely embraced by commuters and visitors alike in San Diego as a viable alternative to car use. Unfortunately, scooters have become targets for theft, with the majority of them ending up south of the border by means of vehicle transport as well through public transit. As a result, Bird has lost over $3 million of our permitted scooters that have therefore been taken out of mobility circulation that should be serving San Diego citizens and visitors. But instead, they are landing in Mexico where they're being sold in chop shops and then modified for resale. Equally distressing is the public safety hazard posed by devices that are entering buses and trolleys, which are often modified to remove our GPS tracking and our battery protections, some of which include our protections over voltage, overheating, and humidity, And with the wiring and connections altered, there's a large risk of short circuit and therefore a thermal incident. So with partnership of the Mayor's Office, SDPD, and the Sustainability and Mobility Department, SMD operators have been trying to reduce the incidence of theft throughout closer monitoring of our vehicles, pursuing prosecution of theft rings, and elevating this problem with local, state, and federal Mexican authorities, with the overall goal being to ensure that these assets continue to serve San Diego and to be safe for those who use them. Putting a ban on SMD devices from entering MTS facilities, trolleys, shuttles, and buses is another impactful way to discourage theft and modification from occurring. We greatly appreciate Mayor Gloria's help to address this problem in a holistic way and support his call for preventing SMD devices from entering MTS property. Thank you again for your thoughtful consideration of this item.
We have no more speakers.
Thank you so much. Any discussion on this item? Councilmember Chavez.
While I agree that this is an issue, I have a few questions that might have been asked before me. Enforcement may come with a monetary cost. We're talking about, you heard us talking about just ticket enforcement and safety. And while I agree this is an issue and I want to see how we can, help each other, who would be absorbing this cost of enforcement? Because as you might have heard, we don't have enough personnel as it is for our day-to-day issues. So that's just a question.
Yeah, that in my presentation, one of the things we talked about is where would the funding come from to support an operation to deal with this? It's just one of the questions we have right now. I don't know how that would be addressed. Right now, as it stands right now, it would come just out of our personnel. We'd have to take somebody off of a train line, off of a ride to be at the station to deal with this.
I am in support of going through with this and helping and partnering up. I just have this question. I don't know if anyone can answer it.
I think Marshall is here from one of the other.
Thanks. Marshall Anderson, California Strategies, and we advise SPIN. Thanks for the question. I don't think we're really asking for that much targeted enforcement. The real issue is that in the absence of code language, let's say we have one of our operators and staff literally follow someone dragging a stolen scooter onto the trolley. MTS security just happens to be there. They'll look at that incident and say, well, if there's nothing in the code, there's very little we can do. I think what we're trying to do is really just solve that vacancy of any code language, just to at least take a step forward and ensure we're sending a clear message to would-be thieves that this is not an allowable use of MTS vessels.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Rodriguez.
I'm so sorry, Councilman. The button wasn't working. My bad. I do have some questions. Just kind of help me think through this. So, where do we know where most of the thefts occur of these scooters?
I don't. I don't know where they originate. I know that the theory is that many of them are getting down to the border and approaching that way. Whether they're riding all the way down to San Ysidro and then just getting off there and taking them over, or stopping somewhere in a line and transporting them to a vehicle and then go over, I'm not sure.
Manager for Southern California with SPIN. So we've identified through hotspots and heat maps that around trolley stations primarily is where our devices lose their brains, their IoTs get killed. And then we can see them pinging again in the trolley system, traveling downwards through San Ysidro.
So folks that steal these devices overwhelmingly take them to the border.
Yes, sir.
At that point, you lose a way to track it. Is that correct?
So it happens it really only happens two different ways.
Okay.
Some people will just pick up the device, put it on a rolling platform, which could be a wheelchair, a skateboard, where the device is still pinging and active, and they'll take it onto the trolley and we can see it travel down the trolley because it's speaking to us on our back office software. Or they can actually kill the brain, kill the IoT through simple tools and measures. And then they can put it on and take it down. And when they bring it back up, we then see it traveling again in various areas down south.
Now, when you say up, you mean north of the border? Bring it
No, I'm
back?
sorry. When they kill the IoT or that's the brain of the device and they repurpose it to sell it and make it workable again. Because when they kill it, it's very hard to track. When they bring it back up, I mean, it's when they reconstitute it and repurpose it and sell it. And then we see it living and active again, still in our software at a later date.
And do you all have a mechanism of following those scooters that come back up online?
Yeah, they're always attached to our software. That's something they can't like patch through unless they completely take it apart, like to the very, the bound down to repurposing the wiring.
Do most of the stolen bikes, do they make their way back and you're able to track them? Or do you completely lose them altogether?
So for instance, if a device loses its power and loses its ability to turn on, if it's never turned back on ever, it'll never reping our back office software. But if it's ever brought back to life, it has to attach to our software. When it does, then we see it pinging, we see its location, its geolocation.
I think what he's trying to find out is where does it end up after they've
Yes.
repurposed it?
So where is it? What's
The
going on?
majority are in Tijuana, down by San Ysidro, and they go further south down into Mexico too.
People use it down there?
Yeah, you can see videos, you can see YouTube videos of people, how to hack our software, how to hack our devices, put it back together. And then there's videos of people just riding them around freely. They get sold. They're on Facebook. They're on offer up for sale.
Yeah, that's definitely news to me. I was not aware of that, but I am very sympathetic for any business that loses very expensive equipment, which your industry is obviously basing itself on. I am also very weary of our financial resources and how strained we are in making sure that we have all they need to feel safe in our cars and in the entire MTS system. So I'm very conflicted, but I want to continue to support to make sure that we have these modes of transports available for our residents here, and that your business continues to thrive in our region.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions specifically towards the
There
operation?
may be. You can take a seat right there, and then if something pops up, then you have to pop up too. Councilmember Donovan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Being new to the board, I'm not exactly sure what our protocol is, but I think if we agree that it's a good idea not to allow these on MTS vehicles, can we give direction to staff to develop some language for our guidelines or whatever, and then make some recommendations on what kind of enforcement, if any, that we want to take on? I would be concerned about liability, if we can't leave it up to our security people to catch everybody, or, all those sorts of things I think need to be hashed out. And I guess if we can give that direction to staff, that would be my recommendation.
I think that's appropriate. It is listed on the agenda as a possible action. And so I think if you wanted to make a motion to that effect.
Yeah, I would make that motion just as stated, if that's fair enough.
Okay, does it need to be repeated? For you, Karen?
You'd like us to put together language to change our ordinance potentially to not allow them on our vehicles.
Yeah, and then make any recommendations on what role MTS should be playing as far as enforcement, tracking, all that kind of, that kind of thing.
Yes.
In addition to the language.
Yeah, so currently what we are doing is that MTS is not allowing multiples because we consider that to be unsafe if you can't control them on board. So Al's team is instructed to tell those people they have to remove them. This would be then, we would be looking at drafting language that would say, here's what we're not going to allow on board, which is solitary single vehicles. And then the question would be, would you want it to be a ban on all scooters, electronic scooters? Or do you want us to just make a recommendation?
I would look to staff to make a recommendation for what's realistic.
And we can do that. I mean, there's, it is it's like you can adopt ordinance language that says this is not allowed. And then the separate question is how MTS enforces that. And so we can kind of give you potential language for that and then what the limitations that maybe of the board of how we go about enforcing that ban.
That would be my motion, Chair.
And I would mention as well that Sandag is currently doing an onboard survey to find out how our riders. One of the questions they're going to ask is how you got to transit. How do you get to transit? And so we hopefully will have better data about who's using those scooters to access transit as well. I probably won't see any of that data until the end of the summer, but that could inform us as to the usefulness of allowing these on board. The last onboard survey they did was in 2015. I just looked the numbers up last night with Dennis, and that was probably predated this whole phrase. And so it was really only about 25 people a day are actually using these scooters to get to. That was in 2015. So big difference. And then I also, just so you all are aware, UCSD has a big interest in solving this problem because they have a real push to try to get these shared mobility devices to be a part of their plans for mobility that's a sustainable mobility choice for their students as well. But I think this is all appropriate for us to contemplate as we think about what the board might want to do to invest in solving the problem.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to encourage the businesses here. Let's say theoretically this goes perfect and, none of these end up on a public transit system. There's also a car that it could just be kind of taken down south of the border, right? And there's other ways. So I would also encourage folks to get creative and to address the issue. And I don't know if you all have considered expanding in Tijuana, if this is indeed a service that is needed, but I don't know, trying to get creative and find ways so that this issue is resolved and it isn't just on one agency's hand.
Yeah, great point, council member. This is such a threat to operations and our ability to not only continue to deploy in San Diego, but also expand, that we're not only tackling this with MTS, we're meeting with PD, with the DA's office. We've also alerted our congressional offices and DHS as well.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
I can second it.
Okay, and please continue with your comments.
So, I mean, it seems like the software you use is very advanced and very top notch. Have you ever considered deactivating just solely the device in one software just to be unutilized as soon as you see it moving in the trolley? Or, and I don't want to talk about, being brought into the trolley and be deactivated, right? But, I'm guessing you already looked into that and that's not feasible.
Yes, ma'am. So in other words, nullifying the housing of the device to be able to be used, kind of like a car, how could I disable the steering wheel? Well, you could always input a new steering wheel per se, right? So that is a thought process to kind of de-incentivize. Like if you take a device, we can make it to where it's non-operable, but we currently do not have that kind of technology to be able to take their ability to modify the device and enable that. We can't currently do that. That was a very good thought though. Thank you.
Councilmember Dillard.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note on what Sharon was talking about. And do we concur that we should perhaps collaborate with UCSD or join in that effort regarding solving the issue? Or is that a consideration?
I just think if we can have that discussion and when we bring language, the next time, maybe our next meeting. There are a lot of different ways, I think, to tackle this. I'll talk about a few of, my ideas and concerns in my comments, but I would just say whatever lessens the burden on MTS, we've had a full meeting of what our CCIs are going through and our guards are going through and the priorities that we have. We heard from our director just now, there were about 10 questions in that slide that we would need to answer and be confident that as an agency, whatever we did, would still be, we'd be conscious of our own situation, including a budgetary situation. That has been my concern. I share also the concern that we want these around, right? I look forward to seeing the data. That was one of my questions about, how are we taking advantage of that first and last mile? That is something that we always discuss in transit conversations, but we really need to look at that data and understand what that is and how the shared mobility devices play a big role in that. So we certainly want to have all of that information as we make our decisions. So very long answer, I guess it would be yes. But what are your thoughts about that?
Potentially. No, I get that whole thing and going towards understanding our entire situation, of course, is a big consideration. So I just want to make sure that we're not missing out in an opportunity if we are going to continue down this pathway, that we are checking ourselves and not missing an opportunity to join in on an effort versus taking our own path and costing ourselves more resources.
So I think just a commitment from staff to monitor that, and that it sounds like the committee members are willing to engage in those conversations or are directing you to engage in those conversations to ensure that MTS stays in the best possible position. Karen.
Yeah, and our understanding of the UCSD wanting us to help is they're supportive of us, adding a provision to our ordinances that you can't have these devices. So like that, I think Sharon's, to the extent that the UCSD wants it, they're supportive of the proposal we've received from the city. And so, our analysis, will highlight that, the parties that have asked us and what they are, and then what the risks are to MTS.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, no problem. Good discussion. We do have a motion and a second on the floor, so we'll be looking forward to that discussion. I think the language is one thing, right? I think we're all committed. It's just that how do we enforce and what are the consequences of that for us as an agency? I think we just really have to look at that. And then also get those questions answered, because those are very real impacts for us. And it's something that I've discussed before. And we met also with SDPD, and what we hear all the time is that we do not have enough resources to deal with a lot of the issues that we have, right? And so adding another priority is just something that we have to think about strongly. So with that, let me see. We also, bigger picture, promise of mobility hubs, things that would reduce this type of activity, but it does sound like it's a very concerted and targeted activity. So yeah, we have a lot to consider, but I do support the motion on the floor. And so if there are no more comments or questions, we can take a vote on that motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So we will now move to committee member communications and other business. Anything anyone needs to say? Okay, yes, Sharon.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, we're very cognizant that the April board meeting, we're trying to keep it light. Would it be okay for us to bring the focus group results to the May board meeting instead?
I am okay with that. And I think in that discussion said, I will leave it up to you all to decide when to bring that. I think the board was okay with that. Okay. So the next meeting date is June 29, 2023 at 9 a.m. Thank you everyone for your participation. This meeting is adjourned.